week of the NFL season is mostly in the books, and unfortunately, we have more injuries to recap. Nick Chubb and Austin Eckler going down in week number 4, which stinks, and we got to discuss what that means going forward from an NFL DFS perspective. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, week 4, I guess I said mostly in the books, but there are still 2 games left for today. So how are you doing?
I'm all right. It was one of those weeks, right plays, not the right combinations. There was, I think this is probably the most indicative sequence, but there was a time on Red Zone within about 8 seconds live for me where Alvin Kamara lost a touchdown to Latavius Murray, and Russell Wilson threw an end zone target to DK Metcalf, which got picked. So it was like an 18-point FanDuel point swing, and like that just kind of summed up my
Which touchdown was that for Latavius that he took away from
Kamara? Yeah, it's kind of a tough scene for Kamara, but I mean overall the peripherals for him still really good, which we'll get into in a bit. But
I got very lucky because the higher dollar contests are the only ones I did well. If you look at my multi-entry stuff, it was just kind of like it was aggressively mediocre is the word I used to describe it, but I got bailed out by everything else going well. It was just like my main single entry team had Dak, which helped a lot. It had Odell Beckham. So I don't know if it was really the process from a multi-entry perspective. Like, I don't know if that was good, but like I got lucky, and I'll take luck. I'm not going to complain about luck. I will certainly, like, whatever leads to a profit, I'm not going to complain. We'll certainly take that. And hopefully we can learn from things as they went down for today. I don't know if you can learn about, Alvin Kamara, given that he's scored like 97 touchdowns so far this year. Like, you're probably going to be okay in the long run. He was still fine. But still some interesting takeaways to discuss. Let's get into the Thursday night game first. The Broncos at the Jets. The Jets were underdogs against Brett Rippon, and then we saw why, because they lost again on Thursday night. Adam Gase still the head coach. Hopefully Le'Veon Bell coming back. Maybe we'll get Denzel Mims back here pretty soon. Maybe Rashad Perriman is back. So this Jets team could look pretty different. What'd you see? Actually, the Broncos could too, because Drew Lock might be back. So what'd you see here in this game?
Yeah, I mean, Rippon had some good plays, had some bad plays, 242 yards and 31 attempts for him, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks, including a pick 6. Through 40 attempts for Rippon on the season, negative 0.03 passing net expected points per drop back, which very bad. Passing efficiency in the NFL is way up. Last year, the NFL average per play was 0.11 expected points per drop back. It's right now 0.17. So either way, Rippon just not really getting it done. His target leaders, 7 for Tim Patrick, 6 for Noah Fant, who did leave with a minor ankle injury is what the report is, the latest report I've seen there. Jerry Jeudy had 4. Jeudy and Patrick both scored. Patrick now has 23% of Rippon's targets. Judy's second at 18%. Rippon's got a downfield attempt rate of just 10%, but does have an ADOT of 8.7 yards. So it's a good bit of intermediate passing, just if that's what we're looking at for another week with the Broncos. Melvin Gordon got featured. He had 23 carries, scored twice while playing 80% of the snaps, according to NFL.com. He has yet to fall short of a 62% snap rate. He has been pretty inefficient as a rusher. I'm not really there. Phillip Lindsay's probably looking likely to return. He did practice last week. They're at the Patriots next week, which if the Patriots play as scheduled, assuming they're playing tonight on Monday, so you assume that goes according to plan. But just not the kind of offense I'm looking for DFS. The Jets also fit that. Jameson Crowder returned, though. He led the team with 10 targets, followed by Jeff Smith with 9. Chris Hogan had 8. I feel like you made a joke about this very similarly, where Chris Hogan would get like 8 targets for...
No, that was Chris Herndon that I made the joke about.
Oh, well.
Which...
I mean, either way, yeah.
He didn't get 5 targets, but he did get the 11 yards, so he does that.
But yeah, Chris Herndon, 3 targets, 11 yards for him. So just a lot of inefficiency here. The one bright spot right now is Jameson Crowder, who has a 29% target share in his 2 healthy games. So that kind of keeps him viable when he's on the main slate for bring back stacks, because Lord knows we're not stacking the Jets. Sam Darnold has been terrible. I mentioned that 0.17 is the league average right now for passing net expected points per drop back. He's at negative 0.17, so that's like 0.34 points per play worse than the league average he's been.
That's like Mahomes last year is, I think, at 0.34. And that's the gap between Darnold and league average right now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, Jeff Smith played 95% of the snaps, but again, with what this team is, I'm looking at Crowder if I'm trying to stack this game, or the opponents, which they host the Cardinals in week 5, so I won't not consider Crowder. There's not a whole lot for me to take away from this game overall. And like you mentioned, maybe these teams look a little bit different next week.
I think the Broncos one is interesting because, like, the reason I like Drew Lock coming into the year is because he had Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, he had KJ Hamler, Jerry Jeudy, but it's possible that Judy's the only guy left once Lock comes back, because you mentioned Fant had the ankle injury, Hamler has a hamstring injury now, so like he might not have that full cast. So I like Drew Lock, but I'd be hesitant to buy in if he's missing both Fant and Hamler. As far as the Jets go, like, Darnold could be a lot better once he gets Perriman and Mims back, but he needs to be a lot better to get in that realm. I agree that, like, despite the inefficiencies of the offense, Jameson Crowder is very much in play. And I think I would expect Crowder to maintain a pretty good market share once Mims and Perriman are back. Are you on the same page there?
Yeah, it's just a matter of there are teams every year where they're just not relevant on a full slate. The Jets will be relevant next week against the Cardinals. The total's 46.5, which is usually like middling, but that's kind of fairly low now.
That caught my attention for it. Like, I know the Cardinals weren't good in week 4, but that seems low.
I think it's got a lot to do with the Jets. The spread's 7.5.
Once Perriman and Mims come back, take off. Hyperdrive, baby. Yeah. In the week 4 FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League, it was Ruffer69, nice, who got the win. They had a huge game stack of the Cowboys and Browns with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Odell Beckham. They added Joe Mixon and Mike Evans, and they scored 216 points, which legitimately was a tournament-winning lineup. This is the second straight week where I've hoped someone in our listener league put that thing in other contests, because you would have been a very rich person. So hopefully Ruffer69 had this lineup in other contests. If you want to get in on the week 5 listener league and apparently share in with the good lineups that happen to go in there, go to FanDuel.com/league/listener league. That's FanDuel.com/league/listener league. The contest is usually up by early Tuesday, so make sure you check that out then. That's FanDuel.com/league/listener league to get yourself entered. Let's move now to that really fun game between Cleveland and Dallas. And unfortunately, the fun was dampened a bit because Nick Chubb got banged up early and was ruled out with a knee injury. He's getting an MRI today, so we don't really know the prognosis on Chubb, but getting ruled out that early, probably not a good sign. Kareem Hunt was banged up coming in. So Dearness Johnson actually led the team with 13 carries. Hunt had 11 carries, but no targets. So if Chubb can't go, I would assume that Hunt is going to have a workhorse-esque role going forward. I know he didn't have that on Sunday, but again, his only practice this week was a limited session on Friday. Ed Werder reported Saturday that Hunt would be limited during the game. So I would disregard the usage here, given Hunt's health coming in. And we should be very, very into Kareem Hunt. I'm going to talk to you about him in just 1 second. The other big winner here was Odell Beckham. He had 3 total touchdowns. 2 of those were receiving. 1 was rushing. The Baker stacks were disappointing, given that one of the receiving touchdowns was from Jarvis and the other one was rushing. He's at 29% of the targets, but because they're so rush heavy, that's just 7.5 targets per game. But 2.5 of them are deep, and he's starting to convert on those. So Jarvis Landry's 18% of the targets. Austin Hooper has 16%. Given their offense's nature, that means that Odell's the only pass catcher who's in play here outside of game stacks. Baker Mayfield is playing really well. That helps, and I'm in on Beckham, but I think that the best comp for Beckham, fittingly, is Adam Thielen, given that Thielen was in Kevin Stefanski's offense last year. Risky due to the team's desire to run, but he does have single game upside and can certainly pay off. It was another huge game here for Dak Prescott. He had 59 attempts for 502 yards and 4 touchdowns. That defense is hideous, and they are running at a super fast pace, and that means we shouldn't expect the shootouts to end anytime soon. Dak is another guy who will be near the top of the quarterback pool every week. We'll kind of get tested on this next week with the Giants facing them, but it's just kind of like this is a shootout every week, which I am more than happy to take advantage of. That also benefits the pass catchers here. Specifically, Amari Cooper continues to go absolutely just nuts. He has 16 targets in this game. He has at least 9 in every game this year. He's averaging 12.75 per game. Especially when they're at home, Amari is going to be among the highest upside receivers on every single slate. Zeke Elliott is averaging 9 targets per game since Blake Jarwin got hurt. Dalton Schultz is at 8. CeeDee Lamb is at 7.7. And Michael Gallup is at 6.3. So all those guys are viable. Obviously, they need to keep throwing to keep that up, but it's an offense we'll want to stack plenty given how bad their defense is. Amari is clearly the number 1 guy among the pass catchers. Lamb has a better floor than Gallup, and they both got similar ceilings, I would say. So I prefer Lamb, but we shouldn't be out on Gallup yet because he does have that same ceiling as Lamb. Schultz is last for me, but I'm very willing to use him either by himself or along with these wide receivers. I just think that the usage is really good there, and I will take advantage. Zeke Elliott kind of got game scripted out here. He lost some work to Tony Pollard down the stretch, but even with that, Zeke still had 12 carries and 8 targets, which is 28 adjusted opportunities. We can't complain about that. We should keep in mind that Pollard will come in during super negative scripts, but I wouldn't expect the Cowboys to be in those often, despite how things have gone to open the season. So I think that Zeke is still pretty much status quo for me, but it was annoying to miss out on some touches there with Tony Pollard. Brandon, I want to go back to you. Nick Chubb, we can probably assume that he will miss some time here. What is your view of Kareem Hunt, assuming he's healthy, with Nick Chubb being out?
Yeah, Chubb and Hunt are like one of the backfields where I can never really play either of them when they're both healthy, or, even if Kareem Hunt's not 100%. Going into this game, I was like, I don't really want to play either of them, even though I love that game. And if you take one of them out of the equation, then you're kind of all in. So I like Kareem Hunt quite a bit. He had 4 red zone carries. We know he can generate targets out of the backfield. So I don't know where the salary is going to be.
So let me ask you that. They're hosting Indy next week. Darius Leonard got banged up in week 4 for them, but they've been among the best defenses in football to open the year. So it's a tough matchup for sure, but name that salary for Kareem Hunt, assuming there's no Nick Chubb.
This is going to be one where you are egregiously high compared to me.
But so this is where you would set it, right?
Well, we always kind of go back and forth. It's
always where you would set it. Like, sometimes it's what you. No, I play it that way. You always play it what I would pay a player. What is fair salary for Kareem Hunt?
Fair?
Yes.
Like 76.
Okay, we're not that far off. I was thinking 8,000.
Yeah, I know. Of course, you think every back with a roll is like 8,000. Mike Davis
is worth 8,000.
But that's what you would set the salary at?
No, it's not. No. Name that.
Isn't that
salary.
What you just said? Isn't that what you just?
Okay, so what we're doing is we are naming a salary.
Yes.
If the salary is lower than what we're willing to pay, that means we're high on them. I'm willing to pay 8,000 for Kareem Hunt, which means that with him being 7,000, which is where he's at this week, we should be very high in Kareem Hunt.
But if it's what you would pay, I would say like 8,000 for Kareem Hunt. If it's what you would set it at, I would still put it like around 76.
Okay. If I say what is a fair salary to you, what comes to mind there?
That's more of what I do, and fair with the context of like the whole slate, which I have to account for because salaries matter. Like, it depends on the slate. I would say 76.
Okay, well, I say 8,000. He is 7,000. Kareem Hunt, I would say, as long as he's healthier this week, I would not be shocked if Kareem Hunt misses practice Wednesday, just because like workload perspective. But like, if we get a full practice on Friday, he's a cash game play at 7,000, right? If there's no Nick Chubb.
I mean, I don't know the rest of the slate, but yeah, that probably puts
Cash game viable. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Let's move on to the next game here, which is Jacksonville at Cincinnati. Joe Mixon had not scored a touchdown coming into this game. He has now scored 3. What else did you see here?
Yeah, the big regression game for him. I was out, didn't know if he was 100%, so I just kind of figured maybe wait another week for the touchdown regression to hit, but I was wrong. He entered this one with 222 yards, didn't have any touchdowns like you said, but scored 3 times. Had 25 carries and 6 targets, 181 total yards. It was an elite performance stemming from elite volume. I mean, when we talk about spending up at running back, it's really what we're talking about. It's hard to score 3 times and have 180 yards when you play, 50% of the snaps. Mixon had 83%, and I'm not pretending like Mixon constantly plays elevated snaps. He's played 59%, 50%, 72, and 83%, but we know that Mixon has 70 to 80% of the snaps in his range of outcomes, and that's where upside for running backs really comes from, unless they're just stealing a bunch of touchdowns. Joe Burrow here averaged 8.3 yards per attempt, ran 4 times for 11 yards. He had a 300-yard passing game with a little bit of rushing. Somehow I wanted more. I was really in on Joe Burrow this week from a pivot standpoint, but overall things are looking up for Burrow. His full season passing net expected points per drop back mark is 0.14, which is just off the league average, as I mentioned. And that is with a ton of lost points on sacks. So if you kind of isolate that out and see what he's doing as a passer, he's been quite good. His lead target getters in week 4 were Tyler Boyd with 8, T. Higgins with 7, Joe Mixon with 6, Drew Sample and AJ Green with 5. AJ Green caught 1 of those for 3 yards. He is now averaging 3.6 yards per target. He's dust for me. I know some other people have gotten to that conclusion already, but one sticking point here is that he's still playing snaps. He played 71% of the snaps. Tyler Boyd was at 77%, and T. Higgins played 57%. So as much as I want to go hard at T. Higgins, I don't want to get ahead of myself because AJ Green still is getting targets. He's getting high leverage targets, and he's on the field. So that is problematic. The target shares since week 2 to coincide with T. Higgins' sort of elevated role, 21% for Tyler Boyd, 18% for AJ Green, 16% for T. Higgins. Higgins has a 16-yard average target depth, 15.7 to be more specific, but he's got a really good downfield role. And if AJ Green sort of tapers out of the offense a little bit, Higgins is going to be in a great spot. The downfield targets, Higgins leads there over AJ Green, but again, it's 11-9 for Higgins over Green downfield since week 2. Tyler Boyd's at 6, so don't want to go too hard at T. Higgins just yet. But right now, this passing offense for me is Boyd followed by Higgins, and then a pretty big cavern to AJ Green.
Question for you.
Yes.
The comp I made for T. Higgins in my Friday piece was that he is like Michael Gallup with a less efficient deep passer. Would you buy that comparison from a usage perspective?
I think that's pretty fair. Yeah.
Or there's no weekly floor, but he has access to a ceiling because of the deep targets.
Yeah, he gets a lot of downfield work. I love AJ Green, but until he stops stealing a lot of that, high leverage work, I just can't get too heavy on.
Here's the other comp. If we're going to go Dallas Cowboys, is AJ Green then Jason Witten?
I was going to say he's definitely not CeeDee Lamb. So.
Nope. I think he's Jason Witten if we're doing 2019 Cowboys. T. Higgins is Michael Gallup. AJ Green is Jason Witten. We should set up a 40-yard dash between the two of them and see what happens.
Speaking of tight ends, Drew Sample got a lot of buzz, I think. I wasn't really there. He has an 11% target share the past 3 weeks. It's kind of up and down for him. I'm not really there. I think I might actually talk about tight ends on Thursday's pod because it's kind of terrible, but some of the elite guys are really putting up big games. So tight end just is a bit of a sticking point for me this season. The Bengals are at the Ravens in week 5, which is interesting for bringbacks. I wouldn't really chase Joe Mixon in negative scripts, but don't hate Boyd or Higgins for the bringbacks. For the Jaguars here, Gardner Minshew might be okay. If you look at his splits through 4 games with and without DJ Chark, It's pretty stark. He's at 0.17. He's league average over the full season, but if you remove week 3 against the Dolphins without Chark, he's at 0.31 passing net expected points per drop back, which is almost twice the league average. I know we're not super high on Minshew, but it's always great to see a quarterback be efficient and raise an offense, or at least not take an offense off the board. Chark himself had 9 targets for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. Laviska Shenault got 6 targets for 86. Tyler Eifert, 6 revenge targets for 22 yards. But in the 3 games with Chark healthy, Keelan Cole does lead the team with a 16% target share. Chark's at 15%. Chenault's at 13%. Chark is getting downfield work with 1.7 targets per game over those 3. He played 85% of the snaps. Keelan Cole had 74% in week 4. Shenault, 51%. So pumping the brakes on Shenault still, but I think arrows up on Chark, especially with Minshew playing the way that he is. And James Robinson was solid again with 17 carries and 4 targets, which is 25 adjusted opportunities, 107 total yards, but no touchdowns, 76% snap rate. That was his highest rate of the year. I think it's kind of the same for me with Robinson, where I need to make sure the salary doesn't get too high. The offense is never going to be one that I'm just fully certain of each and every week. But, with a possibly efficient quarterback, a clear role, I think he's a viable mid-range running back still for sure. They're at the Texans next week. The total is 54.5 according to FanDuel Sportsbook. So I feel like we'll probably take a longer look at the Jaguars throughout the week.
And we're probably going to want to have shares of that game for sure. But going into this game, we were concerned about the target load for Chark. Are those concerns gone for you now because he had a pop game, or will you still be a bit wary given how rough the usage was in weeks 1 and 2?
This would be one of those where it feels like we shouldn't overreact and say, oh, he's a lock for 9 targets because he can get 4 or 5 targets next week, which is not enough. I don't know what the salary I would sort of set for him. He's going to be really tricky. He's going to be game stacks only because I don't think this is DJ Chark from last year right now.
Yeah. I
think it's DJ Chark in 2020, which is a little bit lower for sure.
And it's not like he gets a ton of downfield work. He's very good on the downfield work. We talked about this Minshew before. He doesn't throw deep that often, but he does throw deep pretty efficiently.
Yeah.
So I would probably be looking around 62 or so for Chark next week. Is that roughly in the same ballpark as you?
I was going to say mid 6,000s, but he's 7,000, and I think that's too big of an overreaction. I'll still use him in game stacks, but
yeah.
Chark was always kind of a cash game viable. Unless maybe I'm not remembering his salary correctly from last year, but I feel like he was kind of mid to upper 6s usually.
Yeah, it's 7,000 is a little high. I know he did really well, but it's a little spendy. So we'll see how things play out heading to that. Do you have James Robinson's salary by chance?
I can check in 1 second.
Sorry, I could have done this too.
66, so I think it's unchanged.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's pretty much what I needed. I didn't want it to go up at all.
I agree. The Week 5 Sunday Million Contest is already posted in the FanDuel lobby. Once again, it's just $4.44 to enter with a $1 million first place prize and $2.5 million in total prizes. Obviously, you want to cater your contest selection based on your bankroll, but at least hey, if you want to have some fun and sweat out $1 million, you can do that no matter your bankroll size with just $4.44 to enter. To check it out and get yourself entered, go to the FanDuel lobby or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's dive in here to the Jaguars' opponent for next week. That's the Houston Texans, who, as you said, fell to 0-4 because they fell to the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson backed up the coming out party last week with another solid showing in this game. He had 103 yards on just 5 targets. Adam Thielen actually did top Jefferson for the day with 114 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets. So they both had big days, but the volume is still pretty annoying because Kirk Cousins threw just 22 times. He's yet to throw more than 27 times this season. It helps that a ton of those targets are downfield. More than half of Thielen's targets this year have been at least 16 yards downfield, and 40% of Jefferson's have been. So Jefferson and Thielen are shaping up as guys who will be efficient with big game upside. but the floor is basically non-existent. Like if you told me that Adam Thielen has 38 yards in his next game, not going to bat an eye. Like that's very much in his range of outcomes. If you tell me he has 138, exact same reaction. Dalvin Cook lost a short touchdown to Alexander Madison when he was banged up, but he continues to be, confirm that workhorse role. He had 27 carries and 2 targets. He did get off to a slow start due to their super negative scripts, but he's top 30 adjusted opportunities in 2 straight games. Dalvin's in the upper tier, league-wide at the position. I would say he's on the lower end of that tier just because of the offense's inconsistency and pace, but I still think that he deserves to be in that upper tier because not a lot of dudes get 30 adjusted opportunities per game. The Texans lost here, but it was not on Deshaun Watson. He had 0.31 passing net expected points per dropback, which is a really solid number, so he's fine. He also ran 5 times, so we are all good to use Deshaun as expected. And we know we can stack him with Will Fuller. Fuller had 7 targets. 2 of those were deep. 1 was in the red zone. The hamstring injuries are always scary, but if Deshaun is going to go off, Fuller is almost guaranteed to be involved in that. It's especially true because the other guys here are really tough to get on. Brandon Cooks had a donut on 3 targets. It was really bad for me that he did that. Had some great lineups that would have been a lot better had Brandon Cooks done literally anything, but he did not. Jordan Akins had 3 catches super early, but then he left with a concussion. I used Akins on the Week 4 main slate, and I will use him again if he's healthy because he's running a ton of routes. I like this offense in general, so hopefully Akins can be healthy. And Cooks can work in game stacks, but he's also at just 5.3 targets per game with 1 deep per game, so I would say outside of game stacks, it's Fuller for sure. Akins at times. Cooks, I think he really has to be in game stacks. And I prefer Akins between the two because he feels tight end. With Duke Johnson being back, David Johnson had a split backfield here, but David was the lead back still. He had 16 carries and 3 targets on a 55% snap rate. Duke Johnson had 5 carries and 4 targets. So David's role got bumped down a lot with Duke Johnson being back. He has not gotten big usage in any game this year, and they've actually been competitive the past 2 weeks. So I think he's kind of in the Todd Gurley range where, sure, he'll get volume, but his ceiling from a volume perspective isn't that good, and I think that's kind of underwhelming. So it's pretty tough for me to get behind David Johnson here. And just kind of confirming what the fear was going in with him. Brandon, I want to talk to you about this Vikings team because they don't get a ton of targets, but they do get high leverage targets. So do you ever feel like either Thielen or Jefferson can be cash game viable, or is it just Dalvin Cook who can be a cash game play?
It's just Cook. I mean, with the pass volume being what it is, it's like cash game 101 where you can't really go there. I mean, I like them both as players. Love the roles. I'm just thankful that they're not in the main slate next week, and I don't have to worry about it. So that's how I know.
1 week of reprieve from this offense that can drive us insane. Thankfully, it paid off and everyone was good on Sunday, but they can be a little frustrating.
There are teams where I see that they're in a primetime slot, and I'm like,
thank
good.
Goodness. Yes.
I used to feel that way with the Seahawks. I'm like, I don't want to have to play. I don't want to have to play
the Titans back in the day too, because it would be a 20% target share to everyone.
Yeah, but I wasn't scared of eruptions.
That's true.
I'm like, I don't want to have to deal with Russell Wilson.
I was scared of eruptions from Marcus Mariota. How dare you rethink your thoughts? While you're rethinking, tell us what happened in New Orleans against Detroit. As you said, couple of touchdowns from Latavius Murray to take away from Alvin Kamara. Kenny Gallaudet scored early, but didn't do a ton, I don't think. What did you see in this one?
Yeah, 64 total points. And again, we both liked a bit, but maybe not as much as other games, which goes to show, I think a big part of game theory is just kind of picking games that, I'm not saying this was an off-the-radar game at all, but just picking games that maybe aren't the most obvious. And I know that the game with the highest total did pan out, but it's just a good reminder. And, look, sometimes it doesn't work out. If you tell me the Saints put up 34 points without Michael Thomas or Jared Cook, I would think Alvin Kamara had multiple touchdowns, but he only had 1. Latavius Murray stole 2 from him, had 14 total carries to Kamara's 19. That's kind of what kept me lower on Kamara most of the past few years, is just the risk of losing touchdowns. But that said, pretty sure we mentioned he was due for negative touchdown regression on the podcast last week. But, 19 carries, 6 red zone carries, 4 targets, 119 total yards, and a touchdown. Can't really complain. Could have been a huge game. It happens. I'm not going to overreact. Still one of the best roles in football. Played 67% of the snaps, which, anything below 60%, I start to worry. If you're in the 60s on a really good offense or a really efficient offense, I'm okay with it. So I'm really not changing my tune on Kamara for losing the touchdowns here. And, with no Michael Thomas again, this week it was Emmanuel Sanders who led the way with 9 targets. He had 93 yards. Drew Brees threw just 25 times overall. Of note, Kamara had 4 targets, as I mentioned already, but so did Traequan Smith. He scored twice on those 4 looks. Anytime Traequan's in a dome, I get excited. I wanted to play a lot of him. I didn't. And I think I didn't deserve the 2 touchdowns because he only had the 4 targets. But, in 3 games without Michael Thomas, Kamara has a 27% target share. Smith and Sanders are both at 17%. Thomas did get in some limited practices in week 4, so it's very possible he suits up for week 5 when they play the Chargers on Monday Night Football. With Thomas back, I would shy away from Smith and Sanders. That's more of a question for the single game slate, but I'm still treating this offense pretty much the same, where it's Kamara and Michael Thomas when he's back, but typically I don't get to Michael Thomas on FanDuel because he's like nearly 9,000 with his salary. Brees has been twice the league average per play based on numberFire metrics, despite an average target depth of 5.6 yards. It was 9.3 in week 4. He had 9 downfield attempts, which matched his number from the first 3 games. So take that, haters.
He was reading his Twitter mentions this week. He went Pete Carroll on us.
Yeah, I don't know. It's promising. It's one of the reasons I'm not that high on the offense outside of Kamara, but if he can throw it and it at least shows the willingness to throw it, that's definitely a plus. For the Lions, they had Kenny Gallaudet back for the 2nd straight week. He had 8 of 31 targets for 62 yards and a touchdown. 2 Lions were tied for 2nd in targets with 4. That was DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson. Marvin Jones had just 2 targets. Through 2 games now with Gallaudet, he leads the way with a 24% target share. He's got 3 downfield targets, 4 red zone targets, so that's pretty spicy. Hawkinson is the only other Lion with a target share better than 12%. He's at 18% with no downfield work, but 3 red zone targets the past 2 games. Usually with this team, I'm Gallaudet with a pretty sizable gap to Marvin Jones, but right now I think Jones is kind of not in the conversation. I say that fully prepared for Marvin Jones to score 4 times in week 5, but for me,
on 3 targets.
They're not even playing week 5; they're on bye. But he'll find a way to score 4 times in week 5. But I think for me now, it's Gallaudet with a drop to Hawkinson, and then nowhere else. Adrian Peterson's still too involved, taking too many snaps away from DeAndre Swift. In week 4, Peterson had 44% of the snaps. Swift was the 38%, but this is just kind of Gallaudet, and then Hawkinson if the situation's right.
Yeah. I think the Lions backfield is gross. I hate it. I hate everything about it. I think with Alvin Kamara, you kind of know he's going to lose some touchdowns, but it doesn't really matter because the yardage will be so good. So I think that's why I don't really care too much. That was to my detriment last year because he did run into really bad touchdown luck last year. But I think knowing that he'll lose some to Latavius, some to Taysom Hill, some to Michael Thomas and stuff like that, I'm still okay with just because the yardage is so good. Am I undervaluing touchdowns in doing that?
I know where you're coming from, so I'm going to say no. But I do think that it is a real concern if he's going to continue losing touchdowns, and the touchdowns have been there for him. So we might think that the risk of losing touchdowns is gone, but it's probably not. And maybe we just got really good luck through the first 3 weeks with his, propensity to score touchdowns from fairly far out.
I think we did get good luck, but I also think that he's Alvin Kamara can be in a perfect lineup with one touchdown, which is really valuable to have. So I think that even though we did get lucky the first 3 weeks, I still wouldn't worry too much about it personally. Let's move now to the Chargers of Tampa Bay. Austin Eckler, unfortunately, went down early in this game. Did not look good. Anthony Lynn said Eckler will likely miss some time here. And so we have to look at the backfield for the Chargers. And it seems like it's going to be a 60-40 split in favor of Joshua Kelly. Kelly had 9 carries and 3 targets on a 57% snap rate. Justin Jackson had 6 carries and 2 targets on a 40% snap rate. And I was curious about what the second half would look like because Kelly did lose a fumble near the end of the first half, but in the second half, he still out-carried Jackson 5-2, and they both had 1 target. So I wouldn't worry about the efficiency here. Like Tampa Bay is a really good rush defense. The Chargers were missing the entire right side of their offensive line. So I would say this will be a 60-40 split in an offense that wants to run. And that's pretty valuable for Joshua Kelly. So it's not a perfect profile, but it certainly will work at the right salary. They're not on the main slate next week, so we can't name that salary. But Joshua Kelly, definitely, I think, the guy you want here. And I would probably put him, I don't know, I guess if I'm looking for like a range, if he winds up being in a James Robinson type situation where it's like 16 to 20 carries and 3 to 4 targets, I wouldn't be too surprised about that. It also does help that his quarterback is just balling out right now. Justin Herbert had 0.57 passing net expected points per dropback on Sunday, which is just bonkers. He's at 0.23 in his 3 starts, and as Brandon mentioned, the league average is 0.17. It's weird and kind of frustrating because his worst game came against the worst defense he has faced. He was really good against the Chiefs and the Bucs, who are very good against the pass, so it's really interesting that that's happening. He's doing it with a banged-up offensive line, and they're still a team that wants to run the ball when they can, so that makes it a bit tougher. But Herbert is definitely making this offense better than what I expected it to be. So Justin Herbert really impressing me. I was a bit wishy-washy on him coming out because, like, his stats profile at Oregon was really underwhelming, but, like, he had the blend of efficiency or of youth and experience that you want. Like, that's the same bucket that Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff have all come from, and that's where you want to be. 3 past and future MVPs between those 3, obviously. But so it was interesting where he was, and that's why I'm willing to buy into Herbert. But he didn't have the best stats profile coming out, so still, I'm impressed, but not fully in, but still getting there. He's also just bombarding Keenan Allen with targets. Allen had 12 targets on Sunday. He has 10, 19, and 12 in the 3 games with Herbert starting. Nobody else is more than 18 total in that stretch. That's Hunter Henry at 6 per game. A lot of those looks are close to the line of scrimmage, but Keenan is also averaging 2.7 deep targets per game with Herbert. So it's kind of like a DeAndre Hopkins or Michael Thomas role, except in a less pass-heavy offense. I would expect that to come back to earth a bit once Mike Williams is healthy, because Williams has effectively missed the past 2 games. But Keenan's floor is amazing right now, and he has access to a big ceiling. Hunter Henry's taken more of a back seat. He is at 6 targets per game with Herbert, and just 2 have been downfield. So I'm going to downgrade him while upgrading Keenan quite a bit. But this entire offense is getting a bump up with how Herbert is playing. So stock up for Joshua Kelly, Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert. Stock down a hair for Hunter Henry. A couple of weeks ago, you had said that Austin Eckler's usage would be a Rorschach test for everyone. I think that we got the same thing with Ronald Jones in week number 4, because the usage looks good at times, but there's also some imperfections. He had 20 carries and 9 targets, which is 38 adjusted opportunities, which is amazing. But he played 64% of the snaps. It came with Leonard Fournette out. LaShawn McCoy got banged up early and did not return. Keyshawn Vaughn was getting high leverage looks late in the game. He actually scored a go-ahead touchdown on the second to last drive. And Jones also had some rough drops on those targets. So it was a good game for Ronald Jones, but I don't think it's within his range of outcomes to be a workhorse. And there's a chance his role will not even be as good if they were to have the same personnel next week. So it's probably a game that will just confirm everyone's priors when it comes to Ronald Jones, no matter what they were, which is frustrating because, like, I was lower on him, and I would like to embrace the 20 carries and 9 targets, but there were still some pretty serious red flags there. There are no red flags with Tom Brady. He was awesome. Even without Chris Godwin, he was just dealing. He finished with 0.37 passing net expected points per dropback. He completed 7 of 11 deep passes for 209 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brady seems to be getting in tune with this offense, so we might need to start buying in here because he looked really good on Sunday. 2 guys we should be looking to buy in with Godwin out are Mike Evans and Scotty Miller. Evans did get banged up early, but he played through it. He had 122 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets. Scotty Miller had 83 yards and a touchdown on 7 targets, and Miller was also banged up coming into the game. They will have some very short rest time now because they play again on Thursday, so I would expect Evans to miss some practice this week before the Thursday game, but he'll probably play. And as long as he has both Miller and Evans out there and they're able to go by Thursday, that's a plus for Tom Brady, and I think that we need to be in on Tom Brady right now. There will also be some targets available because, unfortunately, O.J. Howard tore his Achilles, and he's done for the year, and that could be an upgrade for Rob Gronkowski. He ran a season-high 33 routes on Sunday. Cameron Brate ran just 3. But Gronk is also yet to top 7 targets or 48 yards so far this year, so he could go off. I just kind of am okay missing out if it does happen. I don't see it really with Gronk. He had a nice downfield catch on Sunday, but I think for me, it's all about Evans and Miller within this offense. Brandon, because I've been historically a bit lower on Ronald Jones, I do want to check with you. What are your thoughts on him based on a 64% snap rate, but good usage in week 4?
I mean, this was like a very big game or a big opportunity for Ronald Jones with no Fournette, with McCoy going out like right away.
Yeah.
And I mean, their usage was great. Snap rate wasn't necessarily amazing. I just don't really have any interest in Ronald Jones. I think the Rorschach test is applicable here. I didn't really have a lot of interest in Ronald Jones. I still don't because of what happened. And speaking of Rorschach tests, I mean, love Keyshawn Vaughn. So, but I mean, I don't know. McCoy limped off the field. I don't know if he's going to be out for multiple weeks. I don't know what that injury even is, but again, thankfully they're not on the main slate, so I don't have to deal with Arnold. I mean, the single game slate requires a lot of game theory, right? But if this were a full game slate, and let's say Fournette and McCoy were out, I really wouldn't even have that much interest in Ronald Jones still. What
about you, Joshua Kelly? I said probably like a James Robinson type role. Am I being too low on Joshua Kelly? Because we have seen him get pretty big usage even with Eckler healthy. What are your thoughts on Joshua? They're also not on the main slate, but what are your thoughts on him broadly?
Yeah, it's about the same. It's weird. I might prefer the offense a little more with Herbert over Minshew. Obviously, you want the offensive line to be healthier, but I think that's a pretty fair comparison. Okay. I would probably, if I had to pick one, go with Kelly.
Yeah. And I agree with the offense, too. I think I feel better about Herbert than I do with Minshew, personally. But I think that's probably the right area where the usage will wind up being. So let's move now to Seattle at Miami. And Russell Wilson, Brandon, it felt underwhelming, but it was still really good. So I don't know, man. Like, he's just good.
Yeah, I was tilting on Slack to Jim, and Russell Wilson had 263 yards with like 11 minutes to go in the third quarter, and I was like, man, like Russ is done.
He blew it. Russ is cooked. He's no longer cooking. He's cooked.
Yeah. With he ended up with 360 yards on just 34 attempts. I don't know. It's like you and I have known how good Russell Wilson has been for years now, and seeing him throw often is amazing. But it's like we've already been fatigued because we've kind of seen this from Russ, and I think a big part of it, why I feel a little underwhelmed, is at a lot of stacks with Russell Wilson for the guys that he kind of only throws to. But we know that 50% of his targets go elsewhere, and his touchdowns this week went to David Moore and Travis Homer. So whenever your stacks don't hit, it feels like the quarterback didn't really do as much. But Russ is now at 0.38 passing net expected points per drop back, which is the highest of any quarterback who's played at least 4 games so far. Mahomes and Rodgers are above him, but they haven't played yet in week 4. So keep going, Russ. Keep letting him throw. Just the efficiency is insane. Frustratingly, Greg Olson led the team with 7 targets, followed by DK Metcalf with 6. Tyler Lockett, David Moore, Chris Carson each had 4. I keep saying that Lockett and Metcalf combined for half the team's targets, and it's not that far off, but now after this game, it's down to 24% of the targets for Lockett and 20% for Metcalf, so it's closer to 44%, 45%, I think, if you round up. But the high leverage looks still tend to go to them. Metcalf has averaged 3.3 combined downfield and red zone targets per game. Lockett's at 2.8. And behind them, it's not like you can really feel that good with anybody anyway to sort of differentiate. Greg Olson has a 13% target share. Notably, Chris Carson's at 12%. Speaking of Carson, he had 16 of the 22 running back carries and two touchdowns. He wasn't 100% coming in. I was not on him either, really. He's at a per game rate of 21.5 adjusted opportunities, which is fine. But I'm not really still. I'm still kind of not sold on Carson, which is probably just a bias that I have from years past. He played 56% of the snaps, which is kind of in line with his usual rate. You can't ask for a much better offense. I just am not really. I don't know what it is with Chris Carson, so I might ask you about him, even though they play Sunday night against the Vikings. But maybe I need some talking to about Chris Carson. For the Dolphins here, Devontae Parker hurt his ankle in the first quarter, and I was panicking, but he came back, got retaped, and had 12 targets for 110 yards, but didn't score. Behind him on the target tree was Isaiah Ford with 10. He caught just 4 for 48 yards. He's been below league average in per target efficiency based on numberFire's metrics. So I don't mind the volume for Ford, but the efficiency hasn't really been there. Then 9 other Dolphins had between 1 and 4 targets. Myles Gaskin and Jakeem Grant each had 4. Mike Gesicki had a dud of a week with 1 catch for 15 yards, despite 45 pass attempts from Ryan Fitzpatrick, which maybe just bumps down his salary, which I'd be okay with. But Devontae Parker played 80% of the snaps even after, leaving early. Isaiah Ford, Gesicki, both were at 63%. If you exclude week 1 when Parker played only 37% of the snaps, he has a 22% target share, which is 8.3 per game in an offense that does throw the ball a decent amount. He has a downfield target per game as well. Isaiah Ford's at 19% of the targets, which is 7 per game. Gesicki's at 15%, which is 5.7. And then Myles Gaskin's at 15% as well, which is 5.3 targets per game. Gesicki still has a phenomenal role. He's got a 12.2 yard average target depth. Parker's still a high volume bet, so I like both of those guys. I actually played Gaskin in some single entry formats, but it was fine. 10 carries, 4 targets. I thought this game would be a little bit more back and forth. He had 3 red zone carries. He's now averaged 3.5 red zone carries per game, but hasn't scored on any of them yet. It's partly a function of the offense, and frankly, the offense isn't amazing. I do think Ryan Fitzpatrick is at least roughly league average, which is viable. Gaskin himself said a 46% rushing success rate, which is pretty good. And he's played pretty much the same role, 65% of snaps in week 4, after 63, 65, and 75% the first 3 weeks. So I'm okay with Gaskin still. It's just one of those backs where it's kind of a trap in a sense on FanDuel, because the snaps are there. The offense is not terrible, but you're really kind of opportunity cost comes into play if you're not spending up for someone like Dalvin Cook or Kamara, and instead going with someone like Myles Gaskin, who's just not guaranteed to be as involved. They're at the 49ers next week as a 7.5 point underdog, so I'll probably go back to this passing offense quite a bit.
Yeah, especially with how banged up that defense is for San Francisco. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'd be willing to go at Devontae Parker. Are you there on Isaiah Ford yet? I feel like I'm not. It's kind of just Parker and Gesicki for me, and Preston Williams is totally out of the picture at this point.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of Parker and Gesicki, right?
Yeah, Ford just hasn't done enough with his targets. I'm sure that'll come back to get me eventually, but just trying to play the right process.
Yeah,
Isaiah Ford isn't really worth spending down for right now.
Yeah. With Chris Carson, I think I'm okay excusing the role because he's coming off an injury. He did get into full practice on Friday, so that, maybe that helps. But it's another one where it just confirms your priors because like, oh, you can say he was hurt, but he also didn't have Carlos Hyde. So it's it could work either way.
He played 64, 58%, and 56% this week of the snaps. Like it's not that like 2/3 to 70% in a great offense. That's kind of my issue. Even though he's, the targets are there, I just don't know what it is with me and Carson.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm higher on you than him, but like I'm not saying he's like some.
Thanks for believing in me more than Chris Carson does.
Higher on you than him. Higher on him than you. There we go. Okay.
I mean, me and Chris have a back and forth, so
he hates you. Yeah, just dogs you all the time in that chat. Let's move now to Baltimore, Washington. A good bounce back spot for Lamar Jackson, but Washington couldn't keep pace, so they got to coast in the second half, and that was kind of the most likely scenario. So it's not a big surprise, and it illustrates why we have to consider that when picking players, especially at quarterback. Like that's a lot of the reason why, like last year, I didn't use Josh Allen a ton because like. The Bills would be in games where like they'd be 7-point favorites and they'd win and they wouldn't throw in the second half. Kind of got that with Lamar Jackson here. So I value a lot what the opposing offense can do. And against Baltimore's defense, it can sometimes be kind of tough. So keep that in mind for sure. The backfield, shockingly, a mess. Who could have seen that coming? Gus Edwards, Mark Ingram, and J.K. Dobbins all have between 9 and I think it was 6 carries. None of them had more than 2 targets. This backfield from a DFS perspective is an easy avoid. Do not waste your time. Even with the limited throwing and with Mark Andrews having 2 touchdowns, it was a great usage day for Marquis Brown. He had 8 targets. 6 of those were deep, which is awesome. He has 6 targets in each game so far this year. He is up to 27% of the overall targets and 48% of the deep targets. In games where they have to throw, which may not be all that often because they're very good, he has the potential to go absolutely bonkers. Andrews is at 21% overall and 22% deep. He's clearly very good, but at their respective salaries in competitive games, give me Hollywood Brown. I love what I've seen from a usage perspective from him. On the Washington side, Antonio Gibson's usage was pretty solid. He had 13 carries and 5 targets. He looked good in the passing game. He did have 4 red zone targets red zone carries, with 2 going to Haskins and 1 for Peyton Barber. 3 of those red zone carries were inside the 5 for Gibson. Barber did get 1 there. Gibson's snap rate was still 44% compared to J.D. McKissic at 55%. So Gibson's still not a great DFS option, but his stock is definitely still continuing to rise. And we need to continue to keep an eye on him because if he can get a little bit more usage, he could be really fun. There was a report on Sunday that Dwayne Haskins could get benched if he struggled. Didn't get benched, but he also was not good. He had negative 3.22 passing net expected points on the day. He weirdly checked down on 4th and goal, which you don't recommend. He was also super conservative here with a 4.4 yard average depth of target. Haskins is holding this offense back. Kyle Allen is bad. He might not be an upgrade, but I also don't think he would be a downgrade. So, I prefer Haskins over Allen, but I don't know if it'd get any worse. Terry McLaurin was productive despite Haskins' issues. He had 118 yards on 14 targets, but no touchdowns. McLaurin's up to a 27% target share with 31% of the deep targets. He's kind of shaping up to be like Allen Robinson was last year, where he gets tons of volume in a really bad offense, which definitely works. We just need to know what we're getting into when we go there because, the offense is bad. Haskins has effectively killed Logan Thomas. He had 4 targets for 8 yards here. Eventually, Thomas will hit. I will not be in on him when that happens because I just don't want to go at someone in this offense with an 18 or 19% target share. I don't want to do it. I'm okay missing out there. Brandon, I want to talk to you about Hollywood Brown, though, because I believe I'm generally higher on him than you are.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on him? I know that, again, I'm higher on him than you are, but have you seen enough to convince you to get in on Hollywood Brown? They host the Bengals next week, so the concerns about the other offense keeping pace are still in play. But what are you thinking here?
So the Ravens are a team where I hope they're not on the main slate.
Yeah, because it's always Lamar could go for 40 points in a game that shapes up really poorly.
Yeah, and Mark Andrews can score 3 touchdowns. I made a joke where I was like, I'm not playing Mark Andrews, and here comes the 3 touchdown game. Didn't quite get there.
In different phrasing, but yes.
That's true, but it's a family podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So with Marquis Brown, had what 6, 6, 6, and
6
8.
and 8. Yeah, the devil.
Like we're only really interested in that because of the offense.
But like, it's kind of similar to like Adam Thielen.
Is it?
Except he's catching passes from Lamar Jackson instead of Kirk Cousins, which I'll take.
Yeah, I mean, no touchdowns yet, so I'm sure he's due for 2 touchdowns. But Marquise Brown is always going to be a tournament-only play for me.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
And so I have to feel confident stacking the Ravens, and the amount of times that they're on the main slate in a stackable game, it's probably like 3 times a year because their better games are like prime time.
Right.
So it's super difficult for me to be in on Marquise Brown. I already saw his salary. I probably would have said 6,000, and he is. I mean, I do ranges of outcomes, and he is one of the hardest guys to peg because we know what the ceiling is, but the floor is also super low. So it's really hard to pin him down with a single salary. But he's 61. I think that's probably fair.
Yep.
They're 13 and a half point favorites next week.
But I kind of feel better about Cincinnati keeping pace than I did about Washington. I don't know if that's very stupid. It could be very stupid, but
no, that's totally fair. But would you be astonished if Lamar throws like 25 times because they just like you might project him around like 27, honestly, right? Yeah, and so
but like 27% of 27 throws is, I don't know, because I don't want to do math, but like the checklist for a wide receiver to be tournament viable is they need to get 85 yards or 2 touchdowns. He's had 86 yards in 2 of 4 games this year. So I think that Marquise Brown is a tournament option next week. I agree with you. He will never be a cash game play because the Ravens could just obliterate everyone. But for tournaments, I can get there for sure.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Were you trying to mute yourself?
I was trying to unmute myself.
Oh, okay. I just heard the clunk, clunk.
Yeah, Marquise Brown, maybe I need to mute my takes anyway. So.
No, I think your concerns are valid. I just think that because the share of the targets he's getting on those limited targets is getting better, I am more willing to accept it, and that's why.
This is such a weird team because the total is 52 points. They're huge favorites, which I know, huge favorites come with their own problems. But there's Lamar. His salary is 8,900. Mark Andrews is 7,500. Marquise Brown 6,100. Mark Ingram is 61, and then nobody else is above 40. Wait, no, sorry about that. I had MAR, which I didn't realize that there was Lamar, Mark, and Marquise. So
wow, and Mark Andrews. Wow. They're all Mars. Anyway, let's move on to Arizona at Carolina. My bet on covering the spread this week was the over on 52.5. It wound up at 52 points because, of course, hopefully you bet it later because it did fall to 51s. Maybe you got an over there. I did not. What did you see with this one?
Yeah, solid game overall with the 52 total points, but the touchdowns did not go really anywhere relevant. So
except for Mike Davis. Watch yourself. Number 1, RB1, Mike Davis.
Jim, name that salary. Or I will give you an over-under. 10-5 for Mike Davis.
What's the game next week? At Atlanta? Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like 12-5.
Jim loves him some Mike Davis, and I understand why.
We actually need to play Name That Salary with him after this, though. So you go through your recap, and I'm going to cook up an actual number for you.
And remember, this is what you think his FanDuel salary should be.
No. Yes.
Not what you would pay to roster Mike Davis necessarily, because those are 2 different things.
No.
Oh my God.
So what do you think his value is?
I think his value is like...
No, go through the recap first.
Okay. So Mike Davis had like that Christian McCaffrey light role again. He had 16 carries, 6 targets, played 71% of the snaps. Last week, he was at 73% of the snaps. Notably, Reggie Bonifant had 10 carries and 2 targets, but the carry split was 11-5 through 3 quarters. The targets were 4-1 for Davis. So, Bonifant played 27% of snaps. I'm not really worried there. Davis has 29.5 adjusted opportunities per game through 2 weeks as a starter. That's really good. 4 red zone carries, 7.5 targets on average there. I think we can just keep riding him till McCaffrey's back. Teddy Bridgewater was okay, 275 yards and 2 touchdowns, but the touchdown passes went to Bonifant and Ian Thomas. So my DJ Moore shares, thank you. My DJ Moore shares also thank you for giving Robbie Anderson 11 targets. He nearly doubled up all other Panthers because it was Mike Davis and DJ Moore with 6 targets. Anderson again had 11. Ian Thomas had 5. So Anderson really kind of separated himself this week. Anderson had 2 downfield targets and a red zone target. Thomas and Moore each had 2, or Thomas and Davis each had 2 red zone targets rather. And of note, I think we have to look at the past 2 weeks for this team with no McCaffrey. The target shares are now 26% for Robbie Anderson at 8.5 targets per game, 23% for Davis, and just 15% for DJ Moore. I don't want to overreact, but currently Anderson's getting better work. That's actually true on the full season at 25% to 23%. So I still would put DJ Moore first. That could be stupid, but I believe in DJ Moore a lot more, obviously. And I think that gap's closing a lot, and I didn't really anticipate that for Robbie Anderson this year. But at the Falcons next week with a total of 54 points, they're both in play. So we'll talk about that in just a second, unless you want to talk about Mike Davis right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was thinking about this, and I think when you add in what Bonifant did, because Bonifant was on the practice squad, he came up last week, so he hadn't really gotten acclimated with the actual offense yet. So I think Bonifant getting more work this week is noteworthy. So I would say 77 for Mike Davis, my actual take for him.
Okay. I think that same exact number.
Okay, cool.
But he is 68.
Sweet. Cash game viable again.
Yeah.
As far as the Robbie versus DJ Moore thing, I agree with you where the gap is tightening, but I still prefer DJ Moore by a bit. I think that's a very fair way to view it. I think they're both very good, though. I saw DJ Moore went down to $6,600 for next week. I will happily take that. I did not see Robbie's salary, though.
62.
Okay, so I think all 3 of those guys are really good plays again.
Yeah.
This is just a fun offense for fantasy.
Yeah, and as someone who played a lot of them last year with Kyle Allen, I was just a year early, Jim. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. You're just waiting for the savior, Teddy Bridgewater.
Yes.
Future Hall of Famer Teddy Two Gloves.
I'm a little nervous about the Cardinals right now.
Fair.
Kyler Murray's efficiency through 4 weeks is not great. He's at 0.06 passing net expected points per drop back. Again, NFL average 0.17. So it's not panic level, but it's not great. Week 4 was better. He was at 0.13, but had 133 yards, did have 3 touchdowns. Again, to guys who weren't super fantasy relevant, Chase Edmonds, Christian Kirk, and Jordan Thomas. Despite not practicing, DeAndre Hopkins had 9 targets for just 41 yards. Edmonds had 6 targets to rank second on the team. I'll get back to Edmonds in a second. In 3 games now with Christian Kirk healthy, Hopkins has a 31% target share, which is 11.3 per game. Just 0.7 downfield targets per game. Murray, you think would throw it deep a lot, but last year we saw him not, just not throw it downfield a ton after the first few games. It's kind of hit or miss with what their game plan is and what they actually do. Could have a lot to do with how the defense plays them, but it's a little bit of a concern, although with Hopkins, the volume overcomes all that. In those 3 games, again, Larry Fitzgerald and Chase Edmonds have 14% target shares. Kirk's at 13%. So for me, it's nuke or nothing among the pass catchers, but full on panic mode with Kenyon Drake for sure. Should have been there for weeks. Every week we've done a snake draft with you, me, and JJ Zacharias, and I think I've had Drake every week, and it is not panned out. But Chase Edmonds had 6 targets. Drake didn't have any. Drake had 13 carries for 35 yards, which, yards per carry doesn't matter, but 2.7 yards per carry is like, yardage matters, especially if you're not scoring touchdowns. So and the success rate was 39%. So either way, not great. The problem is that Drake played 65% of the snaps, which is pretty typical for him. He's played 71, 65, 68% of the snaps, but he's maxed out at 13.5 FanDuel points. And the biggest issue overall is the receiving. He's had 2, 2, 1, and 0 targets despite the snap rates. Edmonds is the receiving back here. I know it's a small sample, but I don't have snaps on third downs, but I do know that Edmonds has 5 targets on third down and Drake has 1. So I think that tells us a lot. Drake can still explode because he's on the field. You would have to think this offense ticks up in efficiency, but it's kind of empty snaps right now, and that's a problem. They are 7.5 point favorites against the Jets next week, so that's the problem. But they were playing the Panthers this week, and I don't know what to do with Kenyon Drake, but I am going to ask you to maybe name a salary for him.
I don't even know if his salary matters, though, because it's like I can't use him with confidence.
Yes.
And so, the only time I am using him is when I'm making the assumption that, something changes, but I don't know if I can assume that something changes because, why would it when Chase Edmonds has looked better? So I think that's my concern personally, is that I don't expect the passing usage to get better. So, this is going to sound super slanderous, but he's kind of playing a Frank Gore role right now. And we can't consider Frank Gore in daily fantasy. So I don't know. I don't know if the salary matters. 63.
He's 62.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
They called my bluff.
Yeah. It's like you're getting 65% of snaps in what could be one of the better offenses in the league, but
the risk is that you might not get 65% of the snaps if he continues to be ineffective.
Yes, but what's he done so far through 4 games to earn him the 65% of the snaps he got in week 4? No,
you're right. They haven't budged yet, but they still could.
Yes.
That's the concern for me. So, I would say I might treat him similar to Ronald Jones. I didn't think Ronald Jones was a cash game play on Sunday. I had some exposure to him, though, in situations where I assumed he had a good role. I think I'll probably have Kenyon Drake in a similar situation for week 5, but I can't go any more than that personally.
Yeah, I'm out on Drake. I'm not out on Kyler Murray or anything, but no. It's been not great.
Rough. Yeah. Let's move here to the Giants at the Rams. Speaking of being rough, based on the past 2 games, we had thought that Darrell Henderson was the Rams lead back, and we were wrong. Malcolm Brown led with 9 carries. He also had 6 targets because, sure, why not? Henderson had 8 carries and 1 target. Henderson did at least have both carries inside the 10, but we shouldn't trust his backfield, especially with Cam Akers potentially lined up to return next week. So that was fun while it lasted. Jared Goff had his worst game of the season. He had 200 yards on 32 dropbacks. He was at negative 0.01 passing net expected points per dropback. And Goff was top 5 in the league in per dropback efficiency before this game. So I wouldn't mark this as being a huge concern, but it didn't help the offense here by any means. Because the Rams were ahead the entire game, they didn't air it out that much. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp led with 7 targets each. Tyler Higbee and Josh Reynolds each had 4 after Brown's 6. Through the first 4 games, Kupp has 24% of the overall targets and Woods at 22%. The Rams have been keeping things pretty tight to the line, so Woods at 1 deep target per game, Kupp is at 0.5. The offense is pretty run-heavy, so I'd want them in a spot where I know they have to air it out a bit more before going here. But I would rank Woods above Kupp by a bit because of the higher leverage looks. The Giants' backfield here was still a committee. Devontae Freeman did pull away a bit, but 53% snap rate, 11 carries and 4 targets. He was super ineffective as a rusher, whereas Wayne Gallman had 45 yards on 6 carries. Maybe you should use Wayne Gallman instead. Freeman's stock is up, but it's not nearly enough for me to use him, even in a shootout next week at Dallas. just avoid this backfield despite that. Daniel Jones struggled again. He was at negative 0.21 passing net expected points per dropback. That's not overall. Per dropback, worse than Sam Darnold, which is not great. He has faced 4 solid defenses, but he's looked really, 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 really bad. We'll have to use players in this offense next week, but it's pretty hard to be inspired because of how Jones has played. Another inefficient day for Evan Engram. He had 10 targets, but 35 yards. Darius Slayton is getting the high leverage looks here because Evan Engram has no downfield targets out of 30 total targets this year. I was joking about AJ Green being Jason Witten, but it might actually be Evan Engram. Darius Slayton is at 2.5 deep targets per game in the 2 games that Sterling Shepard has missed. He's at 7 targets per game in that span overall. I would rank Slayton number 1 for stacking or for bring back purposes on this team. I would go Engram 2 because the volume has been there and like maybe he can convert against a lesser defense. Golden Tate is 3rd because like Engram, he's not getting downfield work. And so if I'm going to take less downfield work, I at least want to fill tight end and I at least want to have more of the short work. So it's Slayton pretty clearly 1, Engram 2, Tate 3. Brandon, are you putting them in the same order? Because we will have to use the Giants next week against Dallas. Maybe we don't. I think Slayton's a pretty good play. I think Slayton's solid.
Yes. But is that game going to be like 31-6 at halftime?
Yeah. So I think like a Zeke Slayton mini stack would work, right?
Sure.
Slayton's 58. I think that's a very fair number given his high leverage work.
What's Engram?
I don't care.
Yeah.
He's 55. Okay, he came down a bit. So that's better at least.
So like nobody cares about your like fantasy team at all, but Engram and Drake are on my main team and I feel like those are the 2 guys with like the best
most
roles.
Hollow. Yeah, the most hollow
like
work.
The least amount to show for it.
Yeah.
I've been in on Engram a little bit because the role's so good, but with Daniel Jones being so bad, like
he's kind of like Logan Thomas, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like I don't know who that's more offensive to. It's more offensive to Engram or Logan Thomas, but
I think Haskins has been better than Daniel Jones this year.
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked.
Like based on numberFire's metrics, but
I would not be shocked. I know that Haskins has better matchups. Like Jones has faced really tough teams.
Yeah, but
like I don't know, man. If we're gonna make those jokes about Haskins, we have to make them about Jones too. Cowboys defense has been terrible, but they're gonna be in play for DFS next week because of Thomas.
Yeah.
Or because of Jones.
Yes.
Sorry, not Thomas. Cowboys defense next week. Ooh, we're scrolling down. This is exciting. We're still scrolling. Oh my goodness. Cowboys defense is $3,500. There's your cash game defense right there. What could go wrong with trusting the Cowboys defense?
I mean, they stack well with Zeke, right?
Yeah, no. We saw that with Jonathan Taylor last week. Defense, I'm off of running back defense stacks. I had a couple with Mixon and the Bengals yesterday because, like, the Bengals are my favorite defense, but
I'm off of it, but I did it yesterday.
I used it. I'm not actively targeting it.
Oh yeah, I just mean,
yeah,
it's gonna be
I don't want a repeat of the Jonathan Taylor scenario. Let's move. Speaking of Jonathan Taylor, to Indy at Chicago, where Jonathan Taylor got like Thanos snapped for some reason, but David Montgomery ran routes. So this is a very weird game. Please dissect this one for me because I don't know how to handle it.
Yeah, the old 1911 game.
Was that a scoregami? I'm guessing not. But
probably not. But
alas,
it's a weird one. And yeah, I mean, if it was week 4, and I told you like before the season, the Colts play the Bears, and one running back, Air's going to be way up. He's going to be running a lot of routes. Rolls way better. You'd probably think it's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah,
I told you someone just kind of looks not toast. I'm not saying that, but like you think it was.
No, you know what it was? It was the Chicago-based athletic team narrative. Again, a Chicago-based athletic team has bottled Jonathan Taylor. Go Cats!
Yes. Unrelated question. Where did you go to school?
Northwestern. Go Cats! I actually have the Northwestern T-shirt on underneath the Northwestern pullover for today. So we're just going to go like this as you talk. This looks like I'm trying to be seductive.
Well, me and Jonathan Taylor, we got it back and forth. So.
Oh, yeah. Just ask him how he's feeling once he's out of Chicago. Because, Wisconsin at Lucas Oil Bank, Lucas Oil Stadium, from Big Ten championship games, bananas. He just can't play in Chicago. Just keep him in Indy every game.
Yeah.
Use Justin, Jonathan Taylor at home. Never use Jonathan Taylor in Chicago. We figured this out.
Man,
we figured it out. We've deciphered the code.
Well, I thought this would be like a bit of a catch-up game, but it didn't turn out that way. The Colts had 39 rush plays, 29 pass plays, so that's never fun. And despite that, Jonathan Taylor, he had 17 carries, but Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins combined for 18, so it's not great. In the first half, Taylor did have 7 carries. Hines and Wilkins each had 4, so again, less than half of the first half carries. He had just 1 target. Hines and Wilkins combined for 4. He played 46% of the snaps, Jonathan Taylor did, after getting 35% in week 1, but then it jumped up to 67%, then 40% in a positive script last week, and then again 46% this week. So I don't know. I'm lower on Taylor than I have been. The Colts offense is not what I want for DFS necessarily. They're 27th in overall pass rate. They're about average in one-score pass rate so far. We spend up for backs who play 70, 80% of the snaps. That's not what Taylor is right now. His salary was, I think, 75 this week. That needs to come back down for me. I know he's talented. I firmly believe in Jonathan Taylor, but based on what we saw, it needs to be lower. With no Michael Pittman or Paris Campbell, 10 different Colts had a target out of 29 pass attempts. So
what a nightmare.
Yeah. Zach Pascal had 8. T.Y. Hilton had and Trey Burton had 5. Pittman is set to be out until at least week 8. So there is volume to be had here, but nobody really stepped up outside of Pascal, who had 29% of the targets, which is it's good. Don't get me wrong, but just 3 catches to show for it. And despite all this, this is where I have been with Phillip Rivers for a while. He's been pretty good on the year, 0.3 passing and expected points per drop back, but I'm just not that intrigued. The ADOT is about league average. The touchdowns haven't been there, so maybe make the case that touchdown regression's there, but I feel like if there's ever been a quarterback who is good per play but doesn't throw a lot of touchdowns to show for it, it's Phillip Rivers. The tight ends were a cluster as well. Jack Doyle played 62% of the snaps. Trey Burton was at 50%. Mo Cox played 46%. So I don't really know what you do here. They're at the Browns in week 5. The total is pretty solid at 47.5. I'll probably have to take a much longer look here, but this is just a equal opportunity offense, sort of. Nobody has a great target share. Nobody I believe in, at least. So I'm not out on the Colts, but I'm pretty much out whenever they're playing on a pretty full slate. For the Bears, without Tariq Cohen, there were opportunities available in the backfield, and it was mostly David Montgomery. Just 10 carries for 27 yards, but had a promising 6 targets. He played 53 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, 5 of them out wide, which is not what you really expect from David Montgomery. It was 85% of the snaps, which is very nice. 36 pass routes on 46 dropbacks, which is 78% of the routes. That's very juicy. So for me, the arrow is way up on David Montgomery, even though I don't love the offense. Nick Foles has been okay. He was not great in week 4, just 5.9 yards per attempt, but through the game and a half or whatever, 0.11 passing and expected points per drop back, but does have a 9-yard average target depth, which is above the league average. He's been better than Trubisky. He's not a solution to every problem, but he is kind of the solution to the Allen Robinson problem. Robinson had 10 targets for 101 yards and a touchdown late on a pretty slick grab. Behind Robinson, we had Darnell Mooney with 9 targets and Montgomery with 6. Robinson played 89% of the snaps. Mooney was at 74%. Miller, a nice 69% snap rate, but I'm still kind of out on my boy Anthony Miller. The target share so far from Nick Foles have been 23% for Allen Robinson, 17% for Jimmy Graham and Darnell Mooney. His snaps are up the past 3 games as well. Speaking specifically about Mooney, Montgomery's at 13%. So I like Robinson and Montgomery even for a full slate, but they are in that Thursday night game between the Bears and the Bucks. Tom Brady versus Nick Foles.
Ooh, rematch. Ooh, I forgot about the revenge narrative. All right, perfect. So with Montgomery, I fully agree with you. And I think that on Thursday, the efficiency will probably be pretty bad, but I think it's important to keep in mind the Colts defense has been outstanding this year, and the Bucks defense is tremendous against the rush. So I would say week 6, I have no idea who they're facing, but I think that'll be a good time to get in on David Montgomery, assuming he keeps the passing down work that you alluded to, because that could be really nice. So even when things don't go well Thursday night, we should still be into David Montgomery. Let's move now to Buffalo at Las Vegas, where Josh Allen just keeps on doing the dang thing. He had 20.1 passing net expected points on Sunday, which is his second most of all time, but it's another game where he was above 10. He never had more than 10 passing or 10.19 passing net expected points in his career before this year, but he's done, I think, in all 4 games so far in 2020. He's doing it against bad defenses, but it's also important to be able to put up really good stats against bad defenses because it means he'll be closer to average against good defenses. So this is a really good thing. We'll have to keep an eye on the shoulder here because Josh Allen did get banged up, but I believe it was his left shoulder. He played through it, should be full steam ahead, but continue to be impressed by Josh Allen. Another big day for Stefan Diggs, who topped 100 yards once again. He had 7 targets in the 3 full games that John Brown has played. Diggs at 26% of the team's targets, and Brown is at 19%. So Diggs is the clear number 1 here, and Brown is a pretty distant second. You don't have to stack Allen, but when you do, it should be with Diggs more often than not. Brown is in play if you're stacking Allen, but Diggs is clearly the number 1. Zack Moss is out again, and Devin Singletary finally got a touchdown. He had a 2-yard touchdown. That's encouraging. He had 18 carries and 6 targets. He's had big snap rates in the 2 games that Moss has been out, but I still don't think the upside is there. He scored 16.1 FanDuel points. He never had more than, I think, 17.6 last year in a similar role. So if Moss misses more time, Singletary will have a good floor, but his range of outcomes is really, it's just not appealing to me. I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. Josh Jacobs struggled to get going here. He had 15 carries and 4 targets. He totaled 73 yards. His usage has still been good. He's averaged 29.3 adjusted opportunities per game in the first 4 games. He hasn't had the production since week 1, but it's also been with no Henry Ruggs. And I would expect Henry Ruggs being back to benefit Josh Jacobs and everyone else. So I know it's been rough, but once Ruggs comes back, I would say we should be in on Josh Jacobs then. With both Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs out, there's probably not much we can learn from the Raiders passing game here. Darren Waller, another 12-target game. Hunter Renfrow was second with 8. It seems like Ruggs is trending toward being back soon. I feel like that wouldn't be too big of a negative for Waller because it would help lift the entire offense, but it would keep Renfrow out of play for DFS purposes, and we can question whether or not he was in play to begin with. Brandon, next week Buffalo is facing Tennessee, and I know that Tennessee has all these COVID issues, so we don't really know who will play and who won't. But that's the best defense that Josh Allen has played so far this year. What would be your view on Josh Allen and this Bills offense facing a tougher-ish defense against Tennessee?
So I'm to the point with Josh Allen and this offense, specifically Stefan Diggs, where I'm not there in cash games. I think they're going to be higher floor, not higher ceiling necessarily, but higher floor, safer options for cash games because Allen isn't, a mid 7,000 quarterback. He's low 8,000s. So it's really the same. I want stacks. I want exposure to that stack specifically. I'm with you on Singletary where he doesn't do enough for me in DFS. Great
season-long play, just not for DFS.
Yes, that's a perfect distinction to make there. So it's like weirdly the same where when Josh Allen plays any defense, I still want to play some Josh Allen because he can easily lead the slate in points. Stefan Diggs is just phenomenal. So it's really weirdly the same where they're stacks, and I'm going to stack them against any opponent at this point.
Well, and the hope is that Tennessee can keep pace because like that could make Josh Allen even better, despite the fact that he's facing a tougher defense. So I agree. I think I'm fully on board with you there as well. Hopefully Tennessee has the pieces to like be at full strength because this could be a pretty fun game if they are. Let's finish up here with Philadelphia at San Francisco, and the Eagles literally had one receiver at practice for one of their practices this week, but they got a win here, partly because Nick Mullins helped them a lot. But what did you see with this game?
Yeah, I don't know what the takeaways will be here because of how injured they were.
Yeah.
No Dallas Goedert either. So the target shares are going to be all wonky. Zach Ertz played 95% of snaps, which is good. John Hightower played 91%. Greg Ward was at 77%. And my boy from Old Dominion, Travis Fulgham, 60%. Carson Wentz had 28 pass attempts, and Greg Ward had a quarter of them for just 38 yards on those 7 targets. Ertz got 5 targets. Rodgers, Miles Sanders had 4. Travis Fulgham had 3. Despite John Hightower's snap rate, he had 2 targets.
I used him a lot in single game. I'm sad about it.
I mean, you can maybe buy into the snap rate, but I'm not really buying. I'm not playing into any of these market shares, really. I don't know what the health's going to be for this team. Zach Ertz is by far the most appealing because he's a tight end, but the biggest issue for me is that Carson Wentz has just not been good. Negative 0.18 passing net expected points per drop back. We're getting a pretty sizable sample here where I'm just not overly intrigued by what Carson Wentz is putting out there, and that is a big problem for me. They play the Steelers next week, which could go kind of poorly. Miles Sanders is going to be really interesting because he played 77% of the snaps. Again, he had 4 targets, 13 rush attempts for 21 adjusted opportunities, which is on the low end of okay. 6 total Eagles were credited with a carry, but Sanders has now played at least 77% of snaps in all of his healthy games. You'd have to think that pays off eventually. Again, I'm just not in on this offense because Wentz has been not good. And that's
it's also
important.
hard to be not good when you're facing the Steelers next week.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough spot. So
I think that gives you some leeway to take more of a wait and see approach, which is helpful here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Sanders is going to be by far the most intriguing because I don't know what the salary will be.
Yeah.
But the workload's been the snap rate's been good. It's just in a poor offense, it's a little bit harder. The 49ers were somehow more fun here than the Eagles, despite playing with Nick Mullins. They benched Mullins for CJ Beathard, who looked pretty good in comeback mode. Beathard put up 0.18 passing net expected points per drop back. Mullins was at negative 0.3 in week 4.
CJ Beathard's perpetual state is comeback mode. They could be up 30 and dude would be taking weird sacks and just fumbling and chucking it deep. He's like a puppy with the zoomies. That is what CJ Beathard is.
Yeah, I'll take it as long as he keeps throwing to George Kittle, who had 5 of the 19 attempts from Beathard, which is 26% of the targets. He threw 3 times to Jerick McKinnon and Kendrick Bourne, twice to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Overall in this game, Kittle had 15 targets for 183 yards and a touchdown. In Deebo Samuel's first game, just 3 targets and a carry on 25 snaps, which was 34%. Ayuk played 88% of snaps. He's climbing there. Had 5 targets with a carry that led to a 38-yard rushing touchdown and one of the best plays probably of the year with that hurdle to get into the end zone. This is frankly probably the most relevant sample because it's the first game with Ayuk and Kittle and Deebo to some degree healthy. So to me, that means Kittle is clearly the number 1 in the passing game, followed by Ayuk second. Kendrick Bourne had 6 targets as well, but I'd rather go with Ayuk if I had to pick. Speaking of targets, though, McKinnon had 8, played 92% of the snaps in this game. Jeff Wilson played 6 snaps, which was 8%. McKinnon played 62% of snaps in week 3. Raheem Mostert may be out another week. So for me, the arrow's up on Jerick McKinnon, even with potentially CJ Beathard under center for week 5.
Let's say, for funsies, no Raheem Mostert next week. The 49ers are at home against Miami. Obviously, we want Kittle. I agree with you that Ayuk is second. I'll go Debo third because that role will probably expand as he gets further removed from the injury. But name that salary on Jerick McKinnon at home against Miami next week if there's no Mostert again.
Coming off that 92% of the snaps with the great targets, he scores all the time. This might be a little low just because I have to factor in the offense, but and just general context for running backs, but I'd say 7.
I thought 72, and he is 64. Sweet. I prefer Mike Davis at their discounted because Davis is 68. I prefer Davis over Zeke at this point, but
you do.
McKinnon at 64. If we get no Mostert again, that would be so in play. That snap rates, that target share. Hopefully Garoppolo's back by then, but that's a really good role.
Are we looking at Kareem Hunt, Mike Davis, and Jerick in cash? That goes against our ethos, but
I know, but Jerick McKinnon goes against no ethos. Jerick McKinnon is a deity.
I love Jerick.
Teddy Bridgewater and Jerick McKinnon being relevant in 2020 makes me so happy. 2020 has been terrible. It's been a hideous season, but at least we've gotten these tiny morsels of happiness with Teddy and Jerick being healthy and being relevant. There's nothing better than that.
Well, there's one thing that would be better and be that Chris Conley doesn't get relegated to the bench when DJ Chark's healthy, but
yeah, well, we can't get everything we want, unfortunately. It's only my wishes and my desires that come through. I'm sorry. Maybe next year. Maybe not on Conley, but someone else. Find someone else. I think that's the key solution here. That is all the time that we have for today. Pretty interesting week. Like I said, a lot of injuries to track this week between Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert, Jimmy Garoppolo. So we'll see how things play out as the week goes along. We'll get you set for it on Thursday. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. We'll be recording that live on YouTube at 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, so make sure you are subscribed there as well. We have a waiver wire Q&A with myself and JJ Zach Reisman coming up tomorrow. Snake Draft, Brandon, our winner, week number 4. That will be our week number 5 Snake Draft will be on Friday at 3:30. That's on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, from the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your DFS lineups for week number, or for, I guess, your Monday night lineups. I thought it was Thursday. It's not Thursday yet. It's still Monday. Good luck with your 2-game slate lineups for tonight. And also if you're doing any single game slates. Thank you to Calvin Theobald. Did I already say thank you to Cal or no? I can't remember. Whatever.
Yeah, you thanked Cal because I did my double barrel thumbs up.
Okay, I'm going to thank Cal again because Cal deserves it. Thank you, Cal, once again. We will talk to you all again Thursday once I know what day it is. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.